The telegram had come folded twice, its paper brittle, its ink smeared as though the words themselves resisted being read. Monastery of St. Enoch. Fire never ended. Ash drifts still. They whisper your name. Come at once. It bore no signature. Only a wax seal, black and cracked, pressed with the outline of a cross that had been bent until the arms touched. I should have thrown it into the fire. Yet I packed my revolver, my notebook, and a lantern instead. Some cases were invitations one could refuse. Others, like this, were summons. The journey began at the base of Mount Harrow, where the village of Greystone clung to the valley like a secret. It was a place of silence, where the shutters were nailed tight, and no child's laughter cut the air. The only sound was the wind slipping through streets lined with soot. Every stone bore the stain of fire long extinguished, yet the villagers spoke as if it still smoldered. A man named Oric met me at the edge of town. Thin as kindling, with skin leathered from years of smoke, he carried a lantern even though daylight still clung weakly to the peaks. He refused to meet my eyes when I asked about the monastery. "You'll find it by the cinder road," he said. His voice cracked like a dying log in a hearth. "But mind you, detective, fires don't die easy on that mountain. And neither do prayers." He pressed a rosary into my palm. The beads were scorched, fused together in places. I tucked it away without comment, though the weight of it lingered like a dare. The cinder road wound upward in cruel spirals, each turn narrower than the last. Trees stood burned to their roots, black fingers clawing at the sky. Even the rocks seemed blistered, their surfaces glassy, melted and hardened again. Ash coated the ground thick enough that every step sank like snow. Hours passed, though the sun never truly pierced the veil. A haze, gray as morning cloth, smothered the light. Breathing grew heavy. The air tasted of old smoke, bitter and metallic, as though the fire had never been quenched. Halfway up, I found the first relic. A bell, cracked down its center, lay half buried in ash. Its surface bore Latin inscriptions I could barely decipher, though one phrase was clear enough: Ignis Eternum. Eternal fire. The sound of iron scraping against stone startled me. I turned, hand on revolver. But there was no one. Only faint tracks in the ash, barefoot, leading nowhere and vanishing mid-stride. By dusk, the monastery appeared. It rose from the mountaintop like a ruin carved from shadow. High walls leaned inward, scorched and blackened, their stones veined with cracks that still glowed faintly, as though embers pulsed within. A single tower jutted skyward, headless, its bell long fallen. The great wooden doors had burned away decades ago, yet I smelled fresh smoke curling from within. Crossing the threshold, ash stirred in a slow, deliberate swirl, as though welcoming me. The nave stretched wide, its roof half collapsed. Statues lined the walls, their faces melted into featureless masks. Charred pews lay overturned. The altar was nothing but rubble. Yet in the rubble, candles burned. Scores of them. Their flames bent not upward, but sideways, pointing toward the east transept where shadows gathered thicker than stone should allow. I lifted my lantern. The flames sputtered weakly, as if suffocated. My footsteps echoed on the blackened floor, though each echo came one beat too late, as though someone followed. At the transept, I found the first of them. A monk, or what remained of one. His robe hung in tatters, clinging to bones seared black. Yet he stood motionless, hands folded in prayer. Where his face should have been, there was only a hollow mask of ash. I reached for him, though instinct begged restraint. My hand stopped inches away. For his lips moved. Cracked and absent though they were, they shaped words silently. Prayer without breath. Behind him, others stirred. Shapes of monks filled the transept, dozens, perhaps more, all swaying gently. They prayed without sound, their words drifting into the stale air like the smoke of invisible incense. And then I heard it. A whisper not from them, but from the stones beneath my boots. A hiss, faint yet sharp, curling into my ear. Pierce. I froze. The monk nearest me turned his head. Not fully, but enough. Ash flaked from his neck as the movement cracked him open. The hollow mask faced me, and though it had no eyes, I felt the weight of being seen. The others turned in unison. Prayer ceased. Silence pressed in, thick and absolute. I raised my lantern higher. Its flame died at once. In the darkness, dozens of footsteps stirred. Bare, brittle, dragging through ash. I did not run. Not yet. Instead, I reached into my coat and drew the rosary Auric had given me. The beads fused and burned against my palm, but the monks did not advance. They simply watched, their heads cocked at unnatural angles, as if straining to hear a sound only I could make. When I spoke, my voice trembled. "What do you want of me?" The ash on the floor shifted, swirling until it formed words at my feet. Letters etched in gray dust, smoldering faintly as though written by flame. "Find the book." The monks bowed in unison. Their brittle spines cracked like old timbers. Then, as one, they turned and filed into the eastern wall, vanishing through stone as though it were water. Silence returned. I stood alone in the ashen nave, the words still glowing faintly at my feet. Find the book. That night I did not sleep. Instead, I found what remained of the library. Charred shelves leaned drunkenly, their contents reduced to ash long ago. Yet in the center of the room, untouched, lay a lectern. And on it, a single volume. Its cover was bound in cracked leather, blackened but unburned. No dust touched it. No ash dared. The title, pressed deep into the hide, read, Liber Redditus. The Book of Returning. My hand hovered above it. And as the mountain groaned beneath me, I knew the fire had never ended. It had only waited. The book sat before me, breathing. That is not metaphor. Its leather cover swelled faintly with each second, as if air passed through lungs beneath the binding. When I placed my palm against it, warmth radiated outward, subtle at first, then sharp enough to sting, as though the pages beneath carried their own fire. I should have left it untouched. Yet my fingers disobeyed. The clasps gave way without force, though they looked fused by age. The book fell open to its middle, its spine creaking like the groan of something long buried disturbed at last. The pages were unburnt, white as new snow, unmarred by flame. But the words, God help me, the words writhed as I stared. They refused stillness, twisting like smoke. Latin, yes, though archaic, sentences weaving into symbols, then breaking apart again. The ink gleamed faintly, slick like oil on water. I traced one phrase I half recognized. Incinera redent. They return in ash. The candles in the library flickered low, though there had been none when I entered. They must have lit themselves. Shadows stretched and bent, no longer cast by flame, but by something moving behind me. I snapped the book shut, and the ground trembled. Stone cracked near the far wall, spilling dust and fragments onto the ashen floor. The fissure spread quickly, jagged like lightning, until the wall itself seemed to breathe. Then, with a sound like thunder buried deep, it tore open. A passage yawned, descending into blackness. The monks had vanished into stone. Now the stone invited me to follow. I lit my lantern, though its flame was weak, reluctant as before. With each step down the crude staircase, the air grew colder. Moisture slicked the walls. Drips echoed far below. The catacombs. Rows of alcoves lined the tunnel, each containing what had once been coffins. But the coffins were charred, warped by heat, their lids split apart. Within, bones lay black and brittle, fused to wood and stone alike. Some had melted entirely, leaving only impressions like shadows burned into the walls. Yet not all were still. As I passed, one skull tilted toward me, its jaw cracking open in silence. Another's hand twitched, fingers curling through ash. The brittle movement reminded me of leaves stirring in dead wind. The rosary auric had given me burned in my pocket. I quickened my pace. The tunnel opened at last into a great crypt. Pillars rose like blackened trees, cracked and leaning. In the center stood an altar of stone, scorched black. Upon it lay another book, smaller than the one upstairs, but bound in the same cracked leather. I approached, though every nerve screamed against it. My lantern faltered, casting wild shadows. Figures stirred between the pillars, monks, scores of them, their forms little more than silhouettes of ash and smoke. Their heads bowed, they circled the altar in silence. One lifted its head. Where its face should have been, cinders sifted downward, falling endlessly like snow. It raised a skeletal hand and pointed at the altar. The others stopped their circling. One by one, their heads rose, until every hollow mask faced me. Then, in unison, they knelt. A sound followed. Not from them, but from beneath the stone. A heartbeat. Slow. Enormous. The crypt itself throbbed with it. I stepped closer. The book upon the altar vibrated faintly, as though answering the pulse below. But before I could touch it, the floor cracked open. Ash erupted, blinding. I staggered back as a shape clawed upward from the fissure. A figure, taller than any man, robed in blackened cloth fused to its flesh. Its face was hidden, wrapped in bandages of soot, though beneath, I glimpsed the faint glow of embers. Chains clung to its wrists, trailing into the earth. The monks prostrated themselves. The chained figure's head tilted toward me. Ash poured from its bindings with every movement, filling the crypt like fog. Its voice came not as sound, but as pressure, vibrating my bones. The book of returning is not yours. I clutched my revolver. A useless instinct, but instinct nonetheless. What are you? My words came weaker than intended. What remains when prayer fails? What the fire left behind? You open the pages, detective. You are written now. The rosary in my pocket seared against my thigh. I pulled it free, holding it aloft like a torch. For the first time, the monks recoiled, their forms wavering, edges blurring. Even the chained figure shuddered, as if the charred beads struck some hidden nerve. The ground buckled. Pillars split. Dust rained from the ceiling. I ran. Through the catacombs, up the cracked stairs, back into the nave where cold air awaited. Behind me, the crypt roared as if alive, stone grinding, chains dragging. When I reached the surface, the monastery seemed to lean, walls groaning under some invisible strain. Candles guttered and died. And in the silence that followed, the whisper returned. Find the book. But I had found it. I had touched it. And it had touched me. I leaned against the charred doorway, breath shallow, lungs full of smoke though no fire burned. The rosary lay blackened in my palm, its beads cracked beyond saving. The mountain wind howled through the ruins, carrying with it faint voices. Prayers. Dozens. Hundreds. Too many to count. I looked down at my hand. Ash clung stubbornly to my skin, not dust but words. Letters burned into the flesh itself. Latin. Reditus. Returning. And I understood then, this was not merely a haunting. It was preparation. Something long kept beneath the mountain was stirring, and the monks, dead, silent, faithful still, were its congregation. And now, I was part of it. The descent was harder than the climb. By the time I reached the narrow pass leading away from the monastery, dawn had broken, or what passed for dawn. The sky above the peaks glowed faintly, but not with the gentle gold of sun. Instead, the clouds burned at their edges, stained crimson, as if the horizon itself smoldered. Each breath of mountain air felt heavier, tainted with the acrid tang of smoke. My boots crunched on ash where snow should have lain. The monastery loomed behind me, its charred silhouette almost skeletal against the sky. I told myself I had escaped. But the weight in my chest, the faint pulsing still echoing in my ears, whispered otherwise. The path led downward toward the village of Dreveridge. I had seen it only once before, a clutch of stone houses and a single inn that served as a way station for travelers crossing the high passes. Smoke usually drifted from chimneys, carrying the smell of peat and pine. I had expected relief in its sight. Instead, unease deepened. The village was shrouded in silence. No laughter of children, no creak of wagon wheels, no bark of dogs. Only the faint hiss of wind through empty alleys. When I entered the main square, my lantern still clutched in hand though daylight should have sufficed, I found every window shuttered. Doors hung ajar, their iron latches blackened, as though touched by flame. And ash. Everywhere. Piled in corners, spread across cobblestones, coating the wells and troughs. I knelt, touched it. Not cold. Not inert. It writhed faintly beneath my glove, like sand alive with insects. I snatched my hand back. The church bell hung silent in its tower, though I swore I heard it toll once, deep and distant, as if submerged. The inn stood at the far end of the square, its signs swinging limply. The Pilgrim's Rest. I pushed the door open, half expecting emptiness. Instead, someone sat by the hearth. A man, or what looked like one, hunched in a chair, back to me. His shoulders rose and fell with ragged breath. A tankard rested on the table, full but untouched. Relief warred with dread. I cleared my throat. "Sir?" The figure stiffened, then turned slowly. His face, God forgive me, was dust. Skin flaked, eyes hollow pits rimmed with ember glow, lips cracked and crumbling as though he were made of the same ash that blanketed the streets. Yet he moved, alive in parody. "You came down," he rasped. His voice was brittle, every word breaking apart. "Few do." I froze, revolver halfway drawn. "What happened here?" He coughed, scattering flecks of gray across the table. The fire spread. Not with flame. With prayer. They whispered it down the mountain, carried it in their mouths, their lungs. We breathed it. And now... He lifted his hand. Ash sifted from his fingers in endless stream. "We are all sermon and cinder." Behind him, the fire in the hearth guttered, not orange, not red, but white, cold as bone. I backed toward the door. The man rose unsteadily. "You've been marked, detective. I see it on your hand." I glanced at my palm. The burned letters still smoldered faintly, glowing through the glove. "You carry it now. The returning. It will follow you down the mountain, into the valleys, into the world." His words cracked into coughing. He bent double, and with one convulsion his body collapsed, bursting into a cloud of ash. It swirled upward, caught in no wind, before dispersing across the room. Only his tankard remained. The ale within had turned black, thick as tar. I staggered outside into the square. More figures had appeared, villagers, dozens of them, emerging from doorways and alleys. Their movements were slow, brittle. Each step shed fragments of themselves. Some clasped rosaries, beads trailing ash instead of wood. Others clutched hymnals, pages blackened but still clinging to shape. They turned their heads in unison, hollow eyes fixing upon me. And as one they knelt. The air thickened. From the bell tower, the silent bell groaned, swaying though no hand pulled its rope. A low vibration passed through the stones beneath my boots, the same rhythm I had felt in the crypt, a heartbeat. The villagers opened their mouths. Ash spilled out? Not words. Not screams. Only the steady exhalation of dust, rising like incense. Above, the clouds reddened further, forming a spiral over the monastery. And within the spiral, I thought I glimpsed movement, wings of shadow, vast, circling. I fled. Down the narrow road leading out of Dreveridge, boots kicking up gray plumes. The villagers did not chase, but their heads turned, following me until distance hid them from sight. The mountain path wound treacherously, the cliffs sheer on either side. Snow once lay thick here, but now only powder of ash coated the stones. My throat burned with each breath, lungs filling with it. At last I reached the treeline. Pines stood blackened, needles shriveled, as if flame had lit them years ago. And yet frost clung to branches, glittering faintly, unnatural in hue, pale, almost phosphorescent. I collapsed against one trunk, chest heaving. My hand still glowed faintly through the glove. The letters pulsed with the same rhythm as the earth itself. And from the forest ahead came whispers. Not wind. Not leaves. Voices. Dozens. Hundreds. All chanting the same word, over and over. Reditus. Returning. I forced myself upright, revolver heavy in my grasp though it promised no safety. The forest path stretched into gloom, every tree a sentinel, every shadow alive. The monastery had not trapped me. It had released me. And with me, something else had been set free. The forest should have been my refuge. I had told myself that once I left the monastery and village behind, once the ash thinned and the air cleared, I might breathe again. Foolish hope. The pines offered no comfort. Their branches arched overhead like ribs, a cage that swallowed what little daylight bled through the crimson clouds. The further I walked, the clearer the whispers grew. Reditus. Reditus. At first, I mistook them for the sigh of wind through needles. But no wind stirred. The air was heavy, unmoving, as though waiting. The voices carried intent, not chance. They layered upon one another, some high and keening, others low and guttural, weaving a chant that pressed against my skull. Every tree bore scars. Not from axe or fire, but carved deep, as though by fingernails. Symbols, circles, crosses bent sideways, spirals that tangled into themselves. Some bled resin, thick and dark, almost black. The ground beneath was sticky with it. I did not linger. An hour's walk, though time warped, stretched thin and brittle, brought me to a clearing. The pines broke apart around a pool of water. Its surface reflected no sky, no branches, no self. Black, featureless, like obsidian. Yet when I knelt, faint ripples disturbed its stillness. Something below stirred. I dipped my lantern low, its flame weak but stubborn. Light touched the pool, and the water responded. Not with reflection, but revelation. Faces pressed against the surface from below, mouths open in silent scream, eyes wide and unblinking. Dozens. Hundreds. Their features were fleeting, dissolving as quickly as they formed, replaced by others. Men, women, children. Some I did not recognize. Some I did. The innkeeper, his tankard of black ale. The villager who had warned me with coughing ash. And God help me, faces I had known in other cases. Victims long buried, suspects long dead. All staring upward, mouthing a single word. Pierce. The pool quivered as though it hungered for my touch. My hand, traitorous, inched forward. The burned letters on my palm pulsed in rhythm with the ripples. I jerked back. My lantern swayed, flame nearly dying. At once the water stilled. The faces vanished. The clearing was silent again, save for one sound behind me. Footsteps. I spun, revolver raised. They stood at the edge of the trees. Robes blackened, hoods deep, faces obscured. A dozen figures silent, their presence like statues. Yet I knew them. I had seen their kind in the monastery, their shapes caught between shadow and man. Phantom monks. They did not advance. They did not retreat. They spread outward, forming a circle around the clearing, robes brushing needles, ash whispering from their folds. Each raised one hand in unison, palm outward, as though in benediction or warding. The whispers in the forest ceased. Only one voice spoke, though I could not tell from which phantom it came. The sound issued from every direction, weaving through my skull. "You carry the mark." I steadied my voice. "What does it mean?" "The vessel prepares." I swallowed. "For what?" They did not answer. Instead, their heads tilted upward in perfect harmony. Slowly, deliberately, I followed their gaze. Above the clearing, the spiral in the clouds had darkened. No longer crimson, but black edged with firelight, as though the sky itself had torn. Something vast shifted within, wings or limbs impossible to measure. The phantoms lowered their arms and began to walk. Not toward me. Not away. But in a circle, pacing the clearing, their steps precise, forming patterns in the ash-laden soil. I realized then, they were not priests, not keepers. They were wardens. And their circle was not ritual, but prison. The pool boiled. Black water frothed upward, splashing against the soil without wetting it. Shapes writhed within, struggling for escape. A hand emerged, slick and pale, fingers too long, nails like glass. Another followed. Then a face, if it could be called such, featureless save for a mouth stretched too wide. The phantoms halted. Their chant resumed. Not Redditus now, but something harsher, words grinding like stone. Their circle glowed faintly, symbols etched in earth igniting with dull red light. The thing in the pool thrashed, shrieking without sound. It clawed at the boundary but could not pass. And yet, the letters on my hand burned hotter. The creature's mouth turned toward me. Its scream, silent for all others, reached me clearly. "Vessel." The word tore through my skull. I staggered, clutching my head. The revolver fell from my hand, vanishing into ash. My lantern guttered, its flame thinning. The phantoms froze. All hoods turned to me. The chant faltered. And I understood. Their prison did not hold the thing beneath the pool. It held me. The pools surged. Black water reached upward like arms. The phantoms' circle flared brighter, their chanting desperate. Some wavered, flickering like smoke, their shapes thinning as though unraveling. The burned letters on my palm blazed. Pain seared up my arm, through my chest, into my skull. My vision fractured, splitting into dozens of mirrored images. I saw myself from every angle, every moment of my life stacked upon one another, choices made, paths taken, crimes solved, deaths witnessed. And one path yet to come. I saw myself kneeling, palms pressed against the pool, mouth open in chant. My voice was theirs. My body their vessel. "No!" I roared, though my voice sounded weak, distorted. The phantom's circle shuddered, some collapsing, dissolving into clouds of ash. The pool rose higher, shadows writhing within. I stumbled backward. My boot caught on a root, sending me crashing to the ground. My lantern fell beside me, its glass shattering. Flames spilled across the soil. The ash ignited. Not red, not orange. White. Blinding, holy in appearance, yet colder than the grave. The fire spread across the clearing, licking at the pool's edge. The thing within recoiled, shrieking soundlessly, retreating beneath the surface. The phantoms collapsed, robes scattering into nothing. Silence. The fire burned without heat, then dwindled, leaving only blackened soil. The pool was gone. I sat trembling, lantern shards at my side, revolver lost. My palms still burned, but faintly now, the letters no longer glowing but etched deeper, scars carved into flesh. Above, the spiral in the clouds tightened, shrinking until only crimson haze remained. The forest whispered again. Not Redditus this time. Something softer. A name. My name. I staggered to my feet, chest heaving. I did not dare look back at the clearing. The path through the pines stretched onward, and I knew the monastery's reach was far from spent. The forest did not release me easily. Every step deeper into the pines was haunted by echoes of the clearing. My palm throbbed with phantom fire, and though the whispers had softened, their cadence remained, like the faint murmur of prayer drifting through a closed door. I walked faster, lanternless now, guided by instinct more than sight. The trees pressed close, their trunks leaning inward as though conspiring. Branches clawed my coat, tore my sleeves. Roots writhed beneath the ash-strewn soil, catching at my boots. But at last, through the suffocating maze, I saw it, a faint orange glow, steady and alive. A cabin. Smoke curled from a crooked chimney, carrying with it the acrid scent of pine tar and something sweeter, almost cloying. The structure sagged against itself, patched with scavenged boards and hides, but it stood. A refuge. Or a trap. I drew closer. The door hung ajar, swaying with a soundless rhythm. I paused at the threshold, revolver once more in hand. I had found it again, half buried in the ash during my flight, as though the forest itself had returned it. I nudged the door open. The interior was small, but crowded. Shelves bowed under the weight of jars filled with preserved roots, dried herbs, and darker things I could not name. Bones hung from rafters, strung on twine, clacking softly with the draft. The single table bore a crude map carved into its surface, the monastery etched at its center, lines radiating outward like veins. And in the corner, by the fire, sat the hermit. His beard fell in mats to his chest, his skin the color of bark, cracked and weathered. His eyes, though, glowed with a pale light, reflecting the flames yet untouched by them. He did not rise, did not startle at my intrusion. He simply stared, as though I were expected. "You walk with the mark," he rasped. His voice carried dust, age, and resignation. I kept the revolver steady. "And you know what that means?" He chuckled, though no humor warmed the sound. "I know more than you wish. Sit, detective." The title froze me. I had not offered it. I remained standing. "How do you know me?" "The ash knows. The pines whisper. The monastery remembers all who tread its shadow." He gestured to the scarred table. "You are a thread woven into its cloth. Sit before the weave tightens." Against my better judgment, I lowered myself into the chair opposite him. The wood groaned under my weight, as though reluctant to support the living. The hermit leaned closer. His breath smelled of smoke and old meat. "The mark on your palm is older than the monastery, older than the order that built it. The monks were not its masters. They were its prisoners. As you are now." I flexed my scarred hand. The letters seemed to pulse faintly in the firelight. "Prisoners of what?" "The hollow." The name fell like stone. He reached for one of the jars and placed it between us. Inside floated something pale, swollen, its features blurred by brine. A face. Not preserved, not human anymore. Its lips parted, and though submerged, I swore I heard a whisper. The hollow feeds on memory, the hermit continued, on the shape of lives. The monks tried to burn it out, to erase it, but all they did was build a tower around its hunger. The lighthouse, the observatory, the monastery, they are but doors. And doors must be guarded. I thought of the phantom monks, their silent circle, their futile warding. They were keeping it contained. He nodded slowly. Until the mark chooses anew. Until the vessel stirs. His eyes narrowed at me. It stirs now. I gripped the table, knuckles white. Then tell me how to stop it. The hermit laughed, and the sound was hollow as a grave. You do not stop the hollow, detective. You endure it. Or you become it. The fire crackled. Shadows crawled along the walls, stretching too long, bending wrong. The jars rattled on their shelves. The hermit's voice dropped to a whisper. But there is one path. A blade kept hidden, forged not of steel but of memory itself. A relic buried in the catacombs below the monastery. With it you may sever the mark, or deliver yourself wholly. The word deliver slithered, coated in suggestion. I tried to speak, but a sound outside silenced me. Knocking. Not at the door. At the walls. Slow, deliberate raps traveling around the cabin, as though something walked the perimeter, searching for a way in. The hermit's eyes widened, pale fire dimming. They come. I stood, revolver ready. Who? He shook his head. Not who. What? The knocking ceased. Then a voice seeped through the cracks in the wood, soft and many-tongued, as though dozens spoke as one. Pierce. The hermit shoved a bundle into my arms, cloth, coarse and reeking of sage. Take this. Wrap your hand. Do not let them see the mark. The walls bowed inward. Splinters fell like rain. The fire guttered. I pulled the cloth tight around my palm. The whispers dimmed, muffled as though sealed. The hermit slumped, exhausted, eyes sinking into shadow. Go, go now, before they break the skin of the world. The door flew open, ash flooding in like water. Shapes loomed in the storm, taller than men, their forms formless, shadows with weight, eyes like hollow lanterns. I ran. The forest swallowed me once more, the hermit's cabin collapsing into silence behind. The cloth burned against my hand, but it held. Somewhere beyond the trees, the monastery waited, and beneath it, the catacombs, where the blade, or my undoing, lay buried. The monastery did not welcome my return. Its silhouette rose jagged against the mountainside, half devoured by shadow and smoke. The bell tower hung like a broken tooth, its iron tongue long since silenced. Yet the air here vibrated faintly, as if the stone itself hummed with buried voices. The hermit's cloth burned against my palm, but it dulled the whispers enough that I could move without stumbling. The shapes that had stalked me through the forest did not follow me beyond the clearing. Whether they feared the monastery or served it, I could not say. The great doors groaned as I pushed them open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and ash, clinging to my lungs like wet earth. My lantern cast only a frail circle of light, swallowed by the immensity of the nave. The statues of saints stood eyeless, their faces smoothed by fire. Charred pews jutted like ribs. And at the far end, behind the altar, a stairway descended into dark. The catacombs. The steps were slick with moisture, worn smooth by centuries of feet. The air grew colder as I descended, each breath a visible ghost. Water dripped steadily, echoing like a heartbeat. The walls bore carvings. Not of saints or angels, but spirals, eyes, mouths, repeated endlessly, twisting together until the stone itself seemed to writhe. My lantern's light distorted them, and more than once I swore they shifted when I blinked. I pressed onward. The first chamber opened wide, its ceiling low enough to force me into a stoop. Niches lined the walls, each holding bones, stacked neatly yet strangely, femurs arranged like lattice, skulls set in circles staring inward. At the chamber's center lay a stone basin filled not with water, but with ash. When I stepped closer, the ash stirred, though no breeze touched it. Words formed across its surface, drawn by an unseen hand. The vessel descends. My wrapped palm throbbed beneath the cloth. The second chamber was worse. Here the niches did not hold bones but jars, hundreds of them, stoppered with wax. Some contained withered remains, shriveled hands, unblinking eyes. Others were filled with liquid dark as oil, in which faint shapes twisted. As I passed, the jars rattled softly. One cracked, releasing a thin stream of black fluid that wormed across the floor. It hissed when it touched my boot, retreating like a burned animal. At the chamber's far side, a gate of iron awaited. Its bars were blackened, warped. Beyond, a passage sloped downward, deeper into the monastery's roots. A symbol was carved into the arch above the gate, a spiral, broken by a blade. The hermit's words returned, a relic buried in the catacombs. A blade of memory itself. The gate resisted my push, but at last it yielded with a scream of rust. The passage beyond was narrow, forcing me sideways. The walls pressed close, damp stone brushing my shoulders, as though the earth meant to swallow me whole. The further I went, the louder the whispers grew. They did not seep through the cloth but trembled in the stone itself, humming up my bones. Snatches of words clawed through, names, fragments of prayers, cries of the dying. At last the passage widened into a crypt. Pillars rose like tree trunks, carved with spirals and faces contorted in agony. Between them lay sarcophagi, their lids cracked and shifted. The air stank of mold and incense long burned away. And there, at the crypt's heart, stood an altar of black stone. Upon it rested the blade. It was not metal. It was memory solidified, translucent, shimmering, as though carved from glass filled with smoke. Images flickered within, faces I half recognized, moments from lives not my own, screams and laughter and silence. The hilt was wrapped in leather that shifted beneath the light, alternately old and new, decayed and whole. When my eyes fell upon it, my wrapped hand pulsed violently. The cloth split. The letters beneath burned. And the whispers returned, flooding me, drowning me. Take it. Take it. Take it. I staggered forward, revolver clattering to the stone. My hand rose despite me, trembling, reaching for the blade. When my fingers touched its hilt, the world vanished. I stood in the monastery above, yet it was whole, new. Monks moved through the halls, chanting in solemn rhythm. Their faces were hidden by hoods, yet I felt their eyes upon me. One broke from the procession, stepping toward me. His hood fell back, revealing my own face. He smiled. My smile. And whispered, "The vessel accepts." The chant rose around me, deafening. The blade burned in my grip. The letters on my palm spread up my arm like veins of fire. I tore myself back with a scream, stumbling away from the altar. The vision dissolved, the crypt reasserting itself. But the blade remained in my hand. Its weight was unbearable, its hum constant. From the shadows between the sarcophagi, movement stirred. Figures rose. The monks. But not alive. Their robes hung on bones, their faces shriveled, yet they moved, drawn to the blade, to me. Their mouths opened in unison, though no sound emerged. Dozens of eyeless faces, circling. I raised the blade instinctively. Its smoke light flared. The monks halted, heads tilting in unnatural synchrony. And then, as one, they knelt. The whispers fell silent. Only the echo of my own breath remained. The relic had marked me, claimed me. And the monks, or what was left of them, had accepted me as bearer. I looked down at the blade, its images writhing faster now, clearer. Names bled across its surface. And at the very center, brighter than the rest, Pierce. The monks did not move after kneeling. They remained as they were, heads bowed, skeletal fingers curled in prayer around empty air. Their silence pressed heavier than their whispers had. It was not reverence but anticipation, the pause before a hymn begins. The blade in my hand pulsed, a heartbeat that was not mine. Each thrum spread heat through my veins, searing the letters along my arm. When I tried to release it, my fingers refused, locked tight around the hilt. I was bound. I staggered backward, the circle of monks parting silently to let me pass. Their heads turned in unison, following my steps. Some mouths twitched as though to speak, but no words came, only a hiss, like breath caught forever between inhale and exhale. The crypt felt smaller now. The pillars leaned inward. The sarcophagi rattled faintly, lids trembling against stone. My lantern guttered and died, but the blade's glow filled the chamber with shifting smoke light. Faces swam in it, blurred yet almost known, pressing forward before dissolving again. I fled. The passage out of the catacombs was not as I remembered. Where once it narrowed, now it seemed to stretch, twisting, walls bending inward, spirals carved deeper into the stone as though alive. The whispers had returned, not external now but inside my skull, voices tumbling over one another. Pierce. Vessel. Keeper. Bell ringer. The last phrase repeated until it became all I could hear. Bell ringer, bell ringer, bell ringer. I stumbled into the nave at last. The ruined church was unchanged, pews blackened, statues eyeless, yet it felt altered. The air trembled, as though a storm gathered overhead. And then I realized what had changed. The bells were ringing. The tower loomed above, its silhouette stark against the sickle of moon. The bells had not sounded in centuries, their iron tongues cracked by fire. Yet now they tolled, heavy and slow, shaking dust from the rafters. Each strike echoed through my chest, rattling my teeth. The blade burned brighter in answer, as if each toll fed it. The doors behind me slammed shut. I turned. The monks had followed. They filled the nave in silence, kneeling between the pews, their heads bowed toward the altar. When the next bell rang, they raised their heads in unison, eyeless sockets fixed on me. And they began to chant. Not aloud, but inside me. A chorus vibrating through the marrow of my bones, ancient syllables too heavy for the air. The blade lifted in my hand without consent. My arm rose, pointing toward the tower. The chant swelled. The bells rang faster. I stumbled toward the stairwell, drawn as if by leash. My boots struck ash, sending clouds swirling. The tower's interior was a hollow spiral of stone, stairs winding upward into shadow. The sound of the bells grew unbearable here, each toll like thunder inside my skull. I climbed. My legs shook, yet the blade guided me, dragging me higher. Halfway up I paused. Someone else was climbing. Footsteps echoed above, slow, deliberate, descending. Between tolls I heard the scrape of cloth, the rattle of chains. I raised the blade. Smoke lights spilled upward, illuminating the figure. It was a monk, taller than the rest, cloaked in robes untouched by fire. Chains wound across his chest, binding him like a prisoner. His face was hidden in shadow, but his hands were bone, clutching a rope that vanished into the darkness above. The rope of the bell. He had been ringing it. When he spoke, the words were not in my mind but aloud, a voice cracked with centuries. You bear it. The blade pulsed. You awaken it! His head lifted, revealing not bone nor flesh but emptiness, a hollow where a face should be. The bell does not toll for God, he intoned. It tolls for the vessel. The stairs trembled. Dust rained from above. The monk's chant below rose to a frenzy, echoing through the tower. The chained monk extended a hand. Give it to me! The blade writhed in my grip, desperate to leap forward. For one awful moment, I nearly obeyed. But the hermit's words returned. It binds. It seals. I clenched my teeth, forcing my arm down. No! The monk tilted his head. The chains across his chest rattled. Then you will ring it. The bell rope fell into my hands, rough hemp burning my palms. I tried to let go, but as with the blade, my fingers refused. The rope dragged me upward, toward the tower's peak, the chained monk following without need of feet, gliding like a shadow. At the top, the great bell loomed. Cracked, blackened, yet impossibly alive. Symbols were etched into its surface, spirals, mouths, eyes, and with each toll, the symbols writhed like living things. The rope tightened, pulling me close. The blade flared. And I understood. The blade was not merely a weapon. It was a clapper. The bell wanted me to strike it. The chained monk raised his arms, chains spilling loose. Ring, he whispered, though the whisper shook the tower. Ring, and the hollow shall answer. My arm lifted the blade toward the bell. The monks below screamed in unison, a soundless roar vibrating through the stone. The tower swayed. The bell's mouth gaped before me like a cavern, symbols pulsing brighter, waiting. My will buckled. The blade swung. Metal met memory. The sound that erupted was not a toll but a scream, 1,000 voices bursting through me at once. My vision shattered, the world dissolving into spirals and ash. The Ashen Monastery awoke. Silence did not follow the bell's scream. It lingered, a soundless vibration that tremored through every stone, every bone. My teeth ached, my vision swam. The blade in my hand had gone dark, but it pulsed still, as though keeping time with a heartbeat larger than the world. The bell loomed above, cracked wider than before, its surface bleeding light, not golden, not pale, but colorless. The sort of light you only see when your eyes are closed too tightly, shapes blooming against your lids. And from the crack, something seeped. Not smoke, not mist. Absence. A pouring forth of nothing, yet it took form. Hands, faces, silhouettes pressing outward, clawing for release. The chained monk had fallen to his knees. His chains clattered, yet he bowed in worship, head to the stone. It wakes, he whispered. The hollow wakes. The tower shook violently, stones splitting, stairs crumbling beneath me. The rope snapped, thrashing like a dying serpent before vanishing into the widening crack of the bell. I stumbled down the stairs, each step disintegrating behind me. Below, the monks in the nave were no longer kneeling. They rose as one, arms outstretched, mouths yawning wide in silent devotion. Their eyeless sockets poured the same absence light that bled from the bell above. The nave warped as I entered. Columns bent inward, arches twisted, the ceiling stretching impossibly high. Statues leaned close, their faces cracked open, not revealing bone but void. I ran. The monks did not pursue on foot. They floated, gliding across the ash-strewn floor, their robes unfurling like wings. The great doors had sealed, blackened wood fused to stone. I struck at them with the blade, but the metal sank not into wood but into a surface that pulsed like flesh. The door bled ash. Trapped. A new sound joined the scream of the bell, bells answering. From the mountainside beyond, from ruined chapels and crumbled cloisters, from forgotten shrines buried beneath centuries of rock and fire, bells tolled. Some faint, some thunderous, all ringing together in a broken harmony. Each toll tore reality thinner. The frost of absence spread along the walls, erasing carvings, devouring color. The world was unmaking itself, piece by piece. And then I heard another sound. Footsteps. But not the monks. These were sharp, deliberate. Human. From a side passage, a figure emerged. A woman, cloaked in wool heavy with snow melt, her face gaunt, eyes sunken but burning with defiance. She carried not a lantern but a censer, its chain clinking as smoke poured forth. The smoke was not incense but salt white, hissing when it touched the air, forming lines that the monks recoiled from. She saw me, saw the blade, and her lips tightened. "You rang it," she said flatly. I steadied myself. "Who are you?" "Someone who tried to keep it quiet." Her voice was sharp, bitter. "And now you've given it a voice." She swung the censer, smoke spilling wide. The monks shrieked without sound, recoiling, their forms warping, retreating into cracks along the nave. I lowered the blade, though it fought to stay raised. "You knew this would happen?" "I know what that bell calls," she spat. "The hollow is not worship. It is hunger. You've loosened its bindings." She stepped closer, thrusting the censer between us. The smoke curled against my skin, stinging but steadying. The letters on my arm dimmed, the blade quivering like a cornered beast. "You can still fight it," she said. "But not with steel. With silence." The bells outside thundered louder. Cracks tore through the ceiling, moonlight pouring in like knives. From above, the chained monk descended, no longer bound. His chains writhed like serpents, lashing outward, dragging shattered pews across the floor. The woman snarled. "Move!" She hurled her censer at him. The chain struck his hollow face, shattering it like glass. But beneath was no skull, only another mouth, gaping, screaming soundlessly. The scream blasted outward, knocking her to the ground. I lifted the blade. Smoke lights surged again, its will clawing against mine. The chained monk raised his arms, calling the absence forward. The bell above cracked wider, ready to break. And I understood, if it shattered fully, the hollow would not seep. It would pour. The woman gasped, crawling toward me. "Pierce, you must cut it shut." The blade pulsed violently, agreeing. Yet as I raised it, the monks reappeared, walls peeling open to spill them forth. Dozens. Hundreds. Their hands reach, not to harm, but to hold me steady. To keep me aimed at the bell. They wanted me to strike. The woman shouted, "Not the bell! The chain!" The chain monk's bindings writhed still, not broken but alive. They coiled toward the bell's crack, as though anchoring it, holding the wound open. If I severed them. The monks shrieked, rushing me. The woman leapt, shielding me with her own body, smoke pouring from her torn cloak. "Cut the chains, damn you!" I swung. The blade struck iron. Sparks and smoke erupted. The chains screamed, splitting, writhing like severed limbs. The monk howled as his body convulsed, hollow face splitting wider. The bell's crack shuddered, closing fraction by fraction. The absence light faltered. I struck again. And again. The final chain snapped with a sound that was not metal but bone. The monk collapsed, his hollow shattering like pottery, fragments dissolving into ash. The bell wailed once more, then fell silent. The monastery groaned. Ash rained from the rafters. The monks scattered, dissolving into dust. The woman dragged me toward a side door, forcing it open as stone crumbled around us. We stumbled into the night, cold air striking my lungs. Behind us, the tower buckled inward, the bell collapsing through the nave in a thunder of ruin. The mountain was silent once more. We stood at the edge of the ruined courtyard, breath steaming in the night. The blade in my hand dimmed, then vanished, leaving only the burned letters across my skin. The woman watched me, her expression unreadable. "It's not gone. You only delayed it." "I know." She turned toward the path leading down the mountain. "Then you'll follow it." I stared back at the ruins. The bell was gone, buried beneath stone and ash. Yet even in silence, I still felt the echo. The scream would not leave me. And I knew she was right. The hollow had not been destroyed, only denied. For now. The mountain was still groaning when she led me back inside. Not through the nave, which was now nothing but shattered stone and smoldering timber, but through a half-collapsed archway behind the ruined cloister. The air inside was colder, heavier, as though the mountain itself was exhaling through its wounds. We descended into the dark. Our only light came from a torch she had taken from a broken sconce. The flame burned erratic, bending away from the stone walls as though something unseen was breathing against it. She hadn't told me her name. I hadn't asked? The silence stretched too long, so I broke it. "You said it wasn't gone. That I'd only delayed it." She nodded without looking at me. "The hollow cannot die. It is older than stone. But it can be bound, if the right seals are restored. And you know how to restore them?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "No. But I know where the answer lies. The monks built this place on older ground. What they hid, they buried. And what they buried, they feared." We came to a staircase spiraling down into shadow. The steps were carved crudely, not by careful masons but by desperate hands. The deeper we went, the stronger the stench of ash and iron became. At the bottom, a gate of rusted bars bent outward, as though something had forced its way free. Beyond, a tunnel stretched into darkness. "Welcome to the catacombs," she muttered. The passage narrowed until we had to move single file. The walls were lined with alcoves, each holding the desiccated remains of monks long gone. Their robes clung like paper, their skulls tilted as if watching. Many had markings carved into bone, prayers, runes, or warnings. The torchlight made shadows crawl across their faces. "These aren't graves," she whispered. "They're sentinels." The further we went, the more the air pressed against us. My skin prickled as though a storm were building underground. The letters seared into my arm began to glow faintly, unbidden. She noticed. "It's reacting. Something is close." We reached a chamber wider than the nave above. At its center stood a stone pedestal, cracked but unbroken, and upon it lay a book. Not bound in leather, but in something darker, slick even after centuries. Chains coiled across it, driven into the pedestal itself, every link etched with symbols. The Niga Reditus. The Book of Return. I knew it before she said it. Her hand trembled as she lifted the torch higher. "They failed to destroy it. So they locked it down here. But the bell above was only half the prison." The book pulsed. Not visibly, not physically, but in the gut, in the air, like a second heartbeat layered over our own. I stepped closer. The glow on my arm brightened, the letters burning. The book seemed to notice. And then the whispers began. Not from the book, from the walls. From the alcoves. From the bones. They rose together, a chorus of murmurs, low and sibilant. I could not make out the words, but I felt the meaning. Open it. Read. Return. The woman stepped between me and the pedestal, her eyes sharp. "Don't listen. That book is how the hollow speaks. If you read it, you won't be yourself." Her warning carried weight, but the letters on my arm pulsed harder, insistent. The same letters that had given me the blade. The same letters that had demanded I strike the bell's chains. And now they wanted me to touch the book. The chamber trembled, dust raining from the ceiling. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, until the sound pressed into my skull. She shoved me back. Pierce, listen to me. We can't destroy it, but we can bury it deeper. Seal the catacombs, let the mountain keep it. But as she spoke, I saw the pedestal's chains twitch. Not loosening, straining. Something within was pulling against them. The hollow was not waiting. It was waking. I tightened my grip on my burned arm, trying to silence the pull. My voice sounded distant in my own ears when I asked, "What happens if it breaks free?" She met my gaze, her face stark in the firelight. Then the bell was only the beginning. The whispers rose to a scream. The chains snapped one by one. The book's cover flexed like a living thing, straining against its bindings. The woman dropped the torch and drew a dagger from beneath her cloak. Its blade was etched with salt and iron, old runes scratched into the steel. She lunged for the pedestal. But the book moved. Chains lashed outward like serpents, coiling around her wrist, dragging her down. She cried out, steel clattering to the stone. The torch guttered, shadows closing in. I seized the dagger, the letters on my arm burning white-hot. The choice was clear: cut the chains, free her. But the letters screamed a different command: cut the book. Open it. Her voice broke through the din. Pierce! Don't! The book's cover shifted, cracking open just enough for light to bleed through. Not absence this time. Not void. But fire. Fire that spoke. And I understood. The hollow was not a single voice. It was a choir. And the book was their hymn. The catacombs shook violently, stones falling, skulls shattering in their alcoves. The monks' whispers rose into howls, the air filled with ash and fire. My hand trembled. Dagger raised. One stroke could decide it. Strike the chains, bind the book once more. Strike the book, open what the monks had died to bury. And my burned arm pulsed like a drumbeat, urging me toward the ladder. The woman's eyes locked on mine. Choose. The chamber's chaos was absolute. Dust, ash, and shards of shattered bones swirled around us, stirred by tremors in the stone and the unrelenting presence of the book. The flame of the fallen torch flickered weakly, revealing the woman struggling against the chains that now wrapped around her forearm like living tendrils. The letters on my arm pulsed faster, stabbing at my mind like rhythmic hammer strikes. Open. 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 They were no longer suggestions. They were commands, a tide of ancient will pressing through my veins. I glanced at the book. Its cover quivered, the chains straining like sinews under impossible weight. The fire inside it had taken a subtle form now, flickering as if alive, shaping into fleeting glimpses of faces, faces twisted in eternal hunger, screaming in silent torment. The woman shouted again. Pierce! You cannot! If you open it, the hollow will not stop at this mountain. It will pour into the world. Her warning was clear, rational, human. But the letters on my arm screamed louder than her voice. They promised knowledge, power, understanding. The burning line traced over my forearm seemed to pulse in sync with the book, a tether connecting my flesh to whatever lay within its pages. The tremors intensified. Stones rattled, and the alcoves around us groaned. Some of the mummified monks had shifted again, skeletons clawing through their coffins, pushing themselves upward to watch. The hollow was aware of the hesitation. I felt my fingers curl toward the cover. Every instinct screamed to resist. But the pull was irresistible, and the book's surface flexed as though welcoming me. The woman struggled, straining against her chains. If you open it, all that was held here, All that was bound will break free. Do you understand me? I did. But understanding came too late. My hand touched the leather-like surface. The fire pulsed beneath my fingertips, searing into my palm without burning, imprinting knowledge directly onto my mind. The chain snapped in a burst of sparks, flying outward as if the metal had been paper. The hollow's voice erupted inside the chamber, not whispers, not murmurs, but a deafening chorus, layered with every sound of hunger, grief, and rage imaginable. I fell to my knees, the book sliding open before me. The pages were not pages, not in any sense I could comprehend. They were living, shifting surfaces, each line of ink writhing and reforming continuously. Names, faces, memories, all stored, all screaming in layered chaos. The woman screamed my name, but it was drowned instantly by the crescendo of the hollow song. The floor beneath us seemed to breathe, rising and falling, folding in on itself like a living lung. And then I saw them. Not figuratively, not the hallucinations I had begun to expect, but entities, towering and impossible. Shadows with form, yet no substance, writhing as if made from smoke and fire. Their eyes, if they could be called that, were voids that drew in the light from the torch, the fire, and the walls. Their mouths opened in silent screams, mirroring the book's cries. "Pierce!" the woman shouted, tears streaming. "Close it! Close it now! Bury it again!" The book's fire seemed to react to my hesitation. Lines of script leapt off the pages, moving over my fingers, imprinting visions I could neither block nor control. I saw mountains split open, cities swallowed, oceans boiling, and humanity shrinking beneath a tidal wave of shadow. And through it all, the hollow laughed, not as a sound, but as a resonance deep in the mind, a vibration that shook every thought. I realized then that there was no choice in the conventional sense. To resist meant the hollow would consume this place and those of us within it, but to comply, open fully, meant unleashing it upon the world. My body moved before I could rationalize. I pressed my palm firmly onto the center of the open page. A pulse surged from the book through my arm, spreading through my chest and into my head. Knowledge, vision, and understanding poured into me all at once, painful, overwhelming, beautiful, and horrific. The woman screamed again. But this time, it was mingled with all. She had not understood until now. The hollow was not simply a force, it was consciousness, awareness. And it had been waiting for someone to read the book fully, someone capable of grasping its song and resisting total annihilation. I lifted my head. The shadows recoiled slightly, not in fear, but in recognition. I could feel them testing me, weighing my mind against their own. "Stop," I whispered, not to the hollow, but to the entities that had formed in the catacombs. Somehow, the sound resonated. They paused. "Pierce," the woman said, her voice trembling. You are not just reading it. You're controlling it." I did not answer. Control was too simplistic. I was mediating, balancing the force, containing it within myself while trying to understand its depths. The fire in the book dimmed, the shifting pages stabilizing, as though acknowledging my authority. The hollow was aware. It knew me. But for the first time, it hesitated. I took a step back, dragging the book with me. The catacombs began to collapse, walls cracking, stones tumbling. But the hollow did not pursue fully. Its influence remained tethered to the book, bound now by my will, or at least a tenuous, delicate semblance of it. The woman collapsed beside me, exhausted, sobbing. You've done it. Somehow, you've done it." I looked down at the book, its pages quivering faintly, almost content. "For now," I said. "But it's not over. The hollow is patient. It waits. And in that moment, I understood the final truth. The monastery had been built as a trap, as a prison, as a safeguard against the hollow. But safeguards only last as long as those who enforce them. And now, I had become the enforcer. The catacombs shook one last time. The entities receded, folding back into the shadows, leaving only echoes and whispers. The woman rose, her hands trembling. We need to leave. The mountain, it won't forgive us lingering. I nodded. The book was heavy in my arms, but it felt lighter than the weight pressing on my mind. Somehow, it trusted me. As we climbed the spiraling stairwell to the surface, I realized the monastery would never be the same. And neither would I. The hollow had tasted the world through me. And it remembered. Above ground, the first light of dawn broke across the jagged peaks. The wind carried ash and frost, and the mountain exhaled, settling into a deathly calm. I looked at the woman. What now? She did not answer immediately. Finally, she said, We wait. And we watch. And we pray that you remain strong. Because the hollow never forgets. I held the book tighter. The sun glinted off its dark cover. For a moment, I could have believed the nightmare was over. But deep inside I knew the hollow was only beginning.